Production of Ruckus is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, the Hartwig family, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. I'm Mike Shannon. The Ruckettes join me shortly. Our topics this week: after last week's elections, it's no party for Missouri Democrats. Not much fun either for Republican leaders in Kansas facing a big budget deficit, and big crowds in Kansas City and elsewhere yelling, "Not my president," plus roast and toast. But we start with our interview segment and take a closer look at Kansas City, Missouri and the greater Kansas City metro area. What are the strong points? Where are the weaknesses? What pathways will lead to a better future? And what pitfalls might block the way? Those kinds of issues are addressed in an essay prepared for the Show Me Institute by Wendell Cox, who's with Demographia, an international demographics and public policy organization based in the St. Louis area. Mr. Cox joins us now to talk about his findings. Welcome to Ruckus. Thanks for coming in.
Pleasure.
You suggest that Kansas City leaders are busy trying to catch up to what other cities are doing, and they ought to be focused on the things that set Kansas City apart. What are some of those things?
Well, you know, every year The Economist and Mercer and others put together lists of the most livable cities in the world.
And Kansas City is not among them.
Not among them, and Kansas City beats all of them on two crucial issues. Kansas City is very affordable, housing affordability, has a low cost of living, and none of the top 10 economist cities can compete with Kansas City. Second issue is traffic congestion, you know, because a city will be better off economically if the population is mobile and can get the jobs throughout the metropolitan area. Kansas City, according to the TomTom Congestion Index of about 150 cities around the world, ranks first in a tie with Richmond, Virginia, for the least traffic congestion.
Let me stop you there for just a second. We spend a lot of time talking about streetcars in Kansas City. As you probably know, There's a new 2.2-mile streetcar. People want to move it farther to the north, also farther to the south. There was just an election about yet another light rail plan that failed. Are you saying there's no need for these kind of mass transportation tools?
Yeah, in the modern day, you have to recognize that there's no hope whatsoever of putting together a mass transit system that can improve mobility. Mobility needs to be improved, and it needs to be good for the Kansas City area to move forward. In fact, transit travel takes about twice as long as by car. So, and that's not to say there isn't value of transit, but the fact is the more mobile you are, the better you will be in terms of attracting businesses from elsewhere.
Okay, you named a couple of things that set Kansas City apart. Are there more?
Well, you obviously have a very good location with respect to logistics, being in the center of the country.
Centrality of the country.
Yeah, exactly. And but again, the real key is the low cost of living, because you see, in the environment you're faced with, which is California housing affordability going through the roof, traffic congestion worsening all over the country, migration is away from places like California and the East Coast, and I believe places like Kansas City, and Kansas City is one of the best of these, have a great opportunity in the long run of attracting domestic migration and economic growth from other parts of the country.
How important do you think development of downtown Kansas City is to the city's future?
Well, first of all, my report is about the metropolitan area. We didn't focus on the city. My sense is it's important to the extent that it can be done without wasting public money. But the fact is, what you need is an area, a metropolitan area that has a growing economy, and recognize also that downtown is only about 5% of the employment. So it's a beautiful downtown area, a wonderful place to put together a millennial type district like the Power and Light District. But the fact is, the city, the metropolitan area has grown very strongly over the last 70 years, and downtown, with all due respect, has not been that important.
Has not grown much, and the real growth is in the suburbs.
Absolutely. You look at the fact that in 1950, Kansas City has had, as I recall, about 450,000 people. It's since tripled its size and now has about 470,000 people. And all of the growth, and I can't remember the exact number, all of the growth besides that has been in the suburbs.
Let me ask you about something that is of interest to people throughout the metropolitan area, whether they live in Kansas City, Missouri or not, and that's the airport. Kansas City International. As I'm sure you know, there's a lot of talk about the need for a new airport, a new one-terminal airport. How critical is that to the metro area's future?
Very, very important. And I can't get into the argument about one terminal, two terminal, or whatever. But the point is that Kansas City has been for years underserved with respect to the airlines, ever since Braniff left an awful long time ago. And in the long run, its competitiveness would be helped a good deal. It's one of the reasons Dallas-Fort Worth is doing so well. But one of the things you've got to think about as you look at the airport is these things are expensive. And we saw, for example, Denver build an airport that, as I recall, I may be wrong on this, I think the Denver airport under construction tripled in cost. Now, that's one thing for Denver that has a huge hub and so on, but it would be very expensive for Kansas City. And so the point is, it's very important for Kansas City officials to find the most cost-effective way to do the most. Because what you want to do is attract more airlines, attract more flights, which will be very important in building a stronger community.
I got to stop you there. One quick final question. The future bright for Metro Kansas City?
Absolutely. Oh. And it's bright because all of your competitors are doing the wrong things.
All right, sir. Thanks very much for coming in. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
That is Wendell Cox, a public policy and demographics analyst. Now let's meet the panel and start a ruckus. Jason Grill is a senior advisor at Paris Communications. Annie Presley is a writer and publisher and well-known GOP fundraiser. Mike Sanders is the former Jackson County executive, now in private legal practice with Humphrey, Farrington, and McLean. And Crosby Kemper III is director of the Kansas City Library System and host of KCPT Centropolis, airing tonight right after Ruckus. Thanks to all of you for coming in. It's good to see you again. There's a lot to talk about. One need not be a sophisticated political analyst to recognize that the November 8th election was not a good one for area Democrats. Come January, all statewide office holders in Missouri will be Republicans. Kansas continues to be a reliable red state. Republicans will be in control of 32 state legislatures, and 34 of the nation's governors will be Republicans. In Washington, the GOP will control the White House, both houses of Congress, and future nominations to the U.S. Supreme Court. A lengthy article in Atlantic Magazine claims that the Democratic Party is now on life support. Fortuitously, we have two former elected officials on the panel who have run as Democrats, and I'm sure they have special insights into this matter. So let's start with Jason, former Missouri State Rep. What does the Democratic Party have to do to revive itself?
We got to do a lot, but I think it starts at the grassroots level. In the last few days, I've had 4 to 5 people I haven't talked to in years who haven't been involved in politics reach out and say, how do I get involved in some of the red districts or counties, Platte County, Clay County, which surprised me. I think people really want to get involved, and I think it starts at the county and state level grassroots, because we know Missouri is completely red right now, and in order for that to change, you got to elect state legislators who are Democrat in 2018 and 2020 before they redistrict everything. So if you want to see change in Missouri, you have to elect Democrats.
Well,
and how do we do that? We get people to run in districts that fit their districts.
But what do they say? I mean, what do they say that they're not saying now?
They say that a lot of the same things that the Republicans said. They talk to working voters, working class people. They aren't. I don't want any extremes to happen here. I do not want the Democratic Party to go way to the left. I think that'd be a huge mistake. It's the economy. You go back to the new kind of Democrat motto that Bill Clinton used in '92. And you do that. And I think you have to find candidates that fit their districts. And if you do that, you can start winning back some seats and start taking some things back, because right now this is the biggest Republican landslide in history of the state.
Mike Sanders, you were elected as a Democratic prosecutor and county executive, and you were the Democratic chairman in Missouri a couple of times at least, as I recall. What is the message to Democrats after this election?
Yeah, I think from the top down. It's not necessarily ground up from the top down. I think the Democratic Party is a party that in so many ways, and I'm going to catch flack for this once so this airs, but it's lost its way. And I think it's lost its way for a number of years. I think the Democratic Party is at its best when it goes back to its core message. The Democratic Party is at its best when it's an advocate for the working class, for the middle class, and it really has to get back to that core message. I think Jason and Annie are right. This is about jobs. Now, when you look at the election cycle of 2016, and I see this as a bridge bridge back to 2010. There are a lot of similarities between these two cycles in terms of how it felt and how it polls. But I think in a lot of ways this was not a social movement. This wasn't a liberal movement or a conservative movement so much as this was an economic cry of help from the country. It's about trade deals. It's about jobs. It's about bringing back the dilapidation of our manufacturing base. That's what this election was about in so many ways. And Donald Trump was not a traditional Republican candidate. This election wasn't about gay marriage or abortion rights or any of those liberal or conservative causes. It was about jobs and people that I think are very fearful about the direction of the country.
So, Crosby, what difference is it going to make to people's lives in Missouri when Republicans are in control of all the mechanisms of power?
First, Mike, I brought a tool to find the Democratic Party in Missouri here. It's going to make a difference, I hope, for jobs. I think you're going to see a more business-oriented, a more work-oriented, job-oriented tax policy.
Right to work legislation?
I think you'll get right to work, and the statistics show that right to work states grow faster. I think you'll get that. But I agree with what Mike and Jason and Annie have said. You need to focus on people where they are. And when Hillary Clinton used the deplorable remark, she lost the election, I think the 47% remark lost it for Mitt Romney. The Democratic Party has lost touch with the average American.
Is there a leader of the Democratic Party, Annie, that you can see? I know you're not a Democrat, but looking at the picture, who's in charge? Who do they turn to?
Chuck Schumer has moved to the top of the heap rather quickly, and I worry very much if they hire Nancy Pelosi again to run the House, because if we have Nancy Pelosi and Elizabeth Warren up, with the same messaging that we've heard before,
You're not going to win
it's
that.
quite
They should go to Tim Ryan.
They had the guy from
congressman
Ohio
from
that's
Youngstown.
for they got to focus on the Midwest again, on what got them to where they are. When Mike Sanders said it perfectly, the working class voters, the fighting for the people. I mean, 3 years ago, all these people I think that voted for Donald Trump would have called him smug and crazy and a Yankee, people from the South. I mean, he wasn't the perfect candidate, but he was able to mobilize the South vote, the Midwest vote, the Rust Belt vote.
Mike,
so, I mean, we could have someone come out of nowhere. Mike, we need a candidate that people like. Yeah. That people really like to get behind.
If Democrats are not representing the people they used to represent, who are they representing?
Well, so I've just said
minorities? Is that what the Democratic Party does, represent minority groups?
I think that what the Democratic Party has become in a lot of ways is it's sort of a hodgepodge of special interests that you sort of patch together. What Bill Clinton was able to do is patch that together, but additionally find the economic message. I think that if you have a Democrat that's going to do exactly what Barack Obama did with his message of hope, I go back to what is the core reason why Democrats have been successful, what's the core reason that's made them successful over the years, and it really is this advocate for the middle class. Now, if there's a leader in the state of Missouri, let's look more, not national, but let's look locally. If there's a leader now in the state of Missouri that Democrats are going to have to turn to on the ballot in 2018, who's going to run then for the U.S. Senate, it's going to be Claire McCaskill. That's where people are going to have to turn in the state of Missouri.
Okay, we've got to stop there. Democrats are not the only ones with problems. Let's take a look at what Kansas Republicans in charge of the state government are facing. The ever-changing projected budget deficit in the state is now pegged at $345 million for fiscal year 2017, and for 2018, a whopping $582 million. And these figures may go even higher if the state Supreme Court rules again that the state does not sufficiently fund its K-12 education system. Some analysts say the court could demand as much as $500 million more. So, Crosby, is there any way out of this mess for Kansas that does not include raising people's taxes?
Probably not. And look, I have an admission of guilt. I supported the Brownback tax plan. Steve Moore actually is probably the author, and he's Donald Trump's economic advisor, so we may expect more of this at the national level. We have to be realistic about what happened. All the small businesses didn't move from Missouri. But at the same time that I would urge my colleagues and friends on the Republican side in the legislature to be realistic, the Kansas Supreme Court has also not been very realistic, hasn't used evidence or empiricism in their decisions. They just put their finger up in the wind, the progressive wind, to say we're not spending enough money. There's no evidence that we're not spending enough money on education in Kansas. There's no evidence to that fact, no evidence whatsoever.
And it is likely, I would think, given the experience of the past, that the state Supreme Court is going to say, you're not spending enough money, find the money somewhere. Where do they find it, Mike?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, having balanced budgets in my career, there's really only two ways you balance a budget in government. This isn't a business. You do one of two things. It's mathematics. It's third grade mathematics. Either cut spending or raise revenues, and so we're some conglomeration thereof. I think another problem that Sam Brownback has beyond his 19% favorability, which is probably continuing to go down, is they've used pretty much every quick fix in the state of Kansas. There are no easy choices. They've taken money out of the highway fund. They've not paid enough into the state's retirement fund for the employees. So how do you balance the budget? It's cut services, raise taxes.
Do you think there's any chance that the state Supreme Court is going to look at this situation realistically and say the state is in serious economic difficulty? We can't ask the legislature to find $500 million more?
I hope they do. I hope they do.
I don't know how they avoid it.
I don't know if they will, but I think that this is the year I think that the LLC small business exception gets passed. I think it'll happen this year. I think people I'm hearing from say that it's going to move forward this year, so hopefully that happens, and that'll cover up some of the budget deficit.
Annie, are there other explanations for the economic problems in Kansas other than the tax cuts? The governor says there are other things. The agriculture segment of society is declining. Oil and gas business not as good as it used to be.
I don't know what it is, and I'm not sure what they expected would happen, and the solutions take longer to get back to zero, and the decisions are going to be even more difficult as they look at what's happening. So I never really understood what they thought would happen. There wasn't enough business from Missouri to move to Kansas to solve the problem anyway.
Well, and now I read that Missouri's having problems with its budget, and the new governor is going to face millions of dollars in shortages.
Well, almost always when there's a shift from one party to another in the governor's office, somebody announces that there's a shortfall. This has happened every time there's a change in party, and it's probably a good thing. It's like Rahm Emanuel said, you don't waste a good crisis. So give Greitens an opportunity to do something about it. I think we should be a little skeptical about the numbers on both sides. The numbers are produced in partisan fashion.
And is Missouri going to do this? Who knows? They could keep scaling back taxes on small businesses.
I think there'll be a move in that direction, but they should do it over a period of time. Yeah. That's the lesson from Kansas. Don't do it all at one shot.
And Mike, there's some talk that Governor Brownback is being considered by the Trump administration to be Secretary of Agriculture. He has the background for it. He was the state agriculture commissioner years ago. If he's offered that, should he take it, or does he have a moral obligation to stay in Kansas and deal with this crisis that some people think he's responsible for?
Okay, so I'm going to say two things. First off, the happiest people probably in the United States that Sam Brownback would go to D.C. would be the people of Kansas, okay, with the 19% favorability. But does he have some obligation to fix this mess, Mike? I don't think there's any question that he does. I think that it would be difficult personally for him to say to the people of Kansas, I've started this great experiment, and I'm going to cut and run to Washington, D.C. I think that would be very, very difficult to do.
And Crosby, he wasn't alone. Brownback wasn't alone in thinking this would work.
No,
a lot of people thought of you and your colleague.
I thought it would work a lot better than it did. And I think the lesson here is you have to get realistic about it. I do think if Brownback goes, it'll be easier actually to solve the problem.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that tax cuts don't stimulate the economy.
No, I think it's clear that they do. The problem is that they didn't stimulate it enough. Also, the other problem, Mike, was they didn't expect all the LLCs in the world to go away, which they did essentially from tax levels.
It seems ironic that in the final days of the presidential campaign, there was fear that Donald Trump and his supporters would not accept the legitimate outcome of the race. Now it's the Trump critics who are having a tough time facing the reality of his election. Large crowds are gathering on Kansas City streets and on the streets of major cities across the country, protesting Trump's election. The protesters' battle cry is, "Not my president." But here's the question. What do they want? What will assuage their concerns? Start with Annie.
So this has been going on a while, these protests. We've seen it over the course of the whole campaign, and we know that this is a way people like to speak out and try to find a way for their voice to be heard. So they're accusing the president-elect of being a bigot, which means you're intolerant of people who don't believe what you believe. So they too are bigots as a general rule. And what we've got to figure out is how to manage MoveOn.org, who has been put together 200 cities with protests and sort of organizing it from the back.
Do you think the protesters are paid, or at least some of them are paid to organize the protests?
Certainly there's evidence that that's occurring, and we also saw in Portland that of the 112 protesters who were arrested, only about 20% of them actually voted. So it's an interesting group of people out there protesting, but I really feel like the better method is to just give the president-elect a chance, have some faith in our system as we have previously, and find a better way, like grassroots, to participate in your party.
Yeah, but Jason, what do they want? I mean, we're not
They just
going
want
to
to be
see
heard, Mike.
we're not going to see Hillary Clinton become president.
No. I think they just want to be heard. I see a lot of college students doing this
Well,
now.
how long do they want to be heard? I mean, for days?
I think what needs to happen is that Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump need to come out, or actually Hillary Clinton needs to come out and say, you know, the election's over again, and I'll get into that in my toast, but we got to move forward.
Well,
I think if some of these
done
political,
that.
I know she's done that, but
President's
this
done
is
that.
still
Yeah,
doing
the
going,
president
so.
the other day at his news conference was very forthright and forthcoming and said, look, this is the way democracies work. You know, you lose, some people lose, and you have to get over it and move on. These people don't seem to be getting over it and moving on.
So I think back to who makes the call. I don't think this is a group that's going to listen to Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, or anybody. This
What about
is,
Bernie
this is,
Sanders?
or Bernie Sanders. I don't know that anybody controls this group. I think this is in so many ways the new normal. If you don't like a result, and you feel disenfranchised, you take to the streets and you protest. I'm not saying that I like it. I'm not saying that that's a good thing, but I think what it shows us is we have a deeply divided country, that Donald Trump will be the first president in my lifetime that gets absolutely no honeymoon period. These started almost immediately. That is very historic. And I think beyond that, from a group perspective in terms of success, I think that when they start to turn violent, when it starts to look like it actually begins to move the needle, as we saw in this last election, the opposite direction. It's negative for them, not positive.
Well, the unhappiness has been exacerbated, Crosby, by the fact that Hillary Clinton is likely to come out on top on the popular vote.
Right. Well, you know, this is a bogus argument in my view. There were 4 contested states in the United States, four swing states that both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton went to over and over and over again. Florida, Ohio, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. Trump won them pretty big overall. Had this been a national popular vote election, the turnout would have been different, the campaign would have been different, and Trump would have won. I think that's the lesson that we should learn from this.
Why don't we elect people by popular vote, Mike? I mean, obviously the Constitution is one reason, but what's the rationale?
Well, the Electoral College, if you go back to the Founding Fathers, it was at some level this great experiment of representative democracy. How's it going to go? There was some lack of trust, as you see, for the voters, what's going to happen. But now you fast forward over 200 years and look at modern electorates. Look at what this does. I think at some point you have to start making the argument that perhaps the popular vote ought to control. I think it's a very compelling argument to make versus this archaic notion of an electoral system. I think it's an idea whose time is coming, if not now.
But isn't the idea that we have 50 state elections, not one national election, that we have a federalist system where power is divided between the federal government and the state governments?
Oh, no, I absolutely agree that is the history of it. The issue is, I think a debate is going to begin to occur as to whether or not it ought to be a national election. Look at 2004. Look at other elections. Should every vote count? Should it come down to this electoral system where you can lose the popular vote and still not win the presidency? I get the way that it is, but I think the debate is beginning to occur as whether or not that's the way it ought to be.
So Senator Boxer has drafted legislation to get rid of the Electoral College, but you've got to remember how the Founding Fathers were thinking, and that was the cities wouldn't overwhelm the rural areas. And if you look at the map, that's exactly what the question was.
Democrats should have campaigned more in rural areas too. I mean, they ignored those.
It's going to take a constitutional amendment to
Yes.
change the way that elections are staged, and that's difficult to get done. Now we're going to head to the soapbox for Roast and Toast, where the Ruckettes acclaim or defame people and events in the news, and we start this time with Annie.
I'm going to toast the Democrats who did not vote for Donald Trump, president-elect, and thank them for maintaining calm and hoping that this president will be successful in his first few months.
All right, Crosby.
So I'd like to toast in bipartisan fashion Alvin Sykes. Alvin has been a crusader for bringing justice in old civil rights cases for almost 40 years. With only an 8th grade education, working in the Kansas City Public Libraries, Alvin has been significantly responsible for the cold case section of the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department. It's being reauthorized on a bipartisan basis. Alvin is a true local hero.
All right, Jason.
My toast is
Speaking of local heroes.
Oh, right. My toast is to the candidate, actually, Hillary Clinton, who came out and said the day after she lost the most surprising election in possibly U.S. history, she said, "We've seen that our nation is more deeply divided than we thought, but I still believe in America, and I always will. And if you do that, we must accept this result and look towards the future. Donald Trump is our president. We owe him an open mind and a chance to lead. Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power. We don't just respect that, we cherish it. It also enshrines the rule of law." To her supporters, look, your greatest anxieties, fears are probably not going to happen, but your greatest hopes and dreams aren't going to happen either. So just be okay with the result. Move forward. Let's actually let President-elect Trump do something first, and let's actually talk about policy.
All right, Mike Sanders.
So I'm going to toast somebody, probably the most influential person in this election cycle that almost nobody's heard of, a guy by the name of Brad Parscale, who's a data-driven guy who came from the private sector to help run the Donald Trump campaign. Every decision in the Trump campaign was driven by social media, by data, everything from media buys to doors that were knocked on to where the money was being spent to where they even focused their speeches and focus group in terms of messages. This micro-targeting is the wave of the future. The Donald Trump campaign, we will look back in history and say this was the first truly modern campaign in American history.
Oh.
All right, and finally, a toast to Kansas City's First Lady of Song, Marilyn Maye. Her performances at the Quality Hill Playhouse in recent days were, as always, well received and justifiably so. At 88 years of age, Marilyn's voice is still rich and strong, and her stage presence remains riveting. Legend is a word that's thrown around carelessly these days, but is absolutely appropriate when applied to Marilyn Maye. We got a few extra seconds. Quickly, Crosby, Centropolis tonight. Who is your guest?
Whitney Terrell, our great local novelist, with his novel about a woman officer in Iraq. I'll be talking to Whitney.
All right, that's coming up right after Ruckus at 7:30 here on KCPT. And that's Ruckus for this week. We are off the next couple of weeks, back on December 15th. Now for the Ruckettes and the crew, Mike Shannon saying thanks very much for watching. Have a great Thanksgiving and good night.